So today we'll be talking about how a democracy can survive. Please. How it will hopefully survive. And so here are a few terms that we'll be looking at. Yes, we will finally get into the Electoral College, and I will do my best to confuse you to death about it. Yes, we will also get into your power to change laws and how it's not simple, but it is possible. And then finally, we will get into how to get rid of bad leaders, because you have the right to do that. You totally have the right to do that, and I'm excited to explain it to you. First, the question: should voters vote directly on specific issues instead of picking representatives to do this for us? It's not a simple question. Within our pockets lies the capacity to pull this off, perhaps. Currently, we elect professionals to make these decisions for us, who read these lengthy bills for a living. It is technically feasible, but it has not yet been attempted. And to be honest, right now, we've got to fix our voter turnout problem before we fix anything else, because we can't have 10% of the American electorate making all of our decisions for us. That would be a big problem. So as we get into the different types of elections that go on through our political system, what I want to help you understand is there's more than just Trump versus Hillary. There's more than just a general election. There are primary elections. That is where Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, Donald Trump, etc. have to compete for the nomination of the Republican Party. And the same on the Democrats. It was Hillary Clinton versus Bernie Sanders versus a few other folks you've probably never heard of before, also competing for the Democratic nomination. There are special elections. That is, if Congressman Meadows decides to retire for family reasons, whatever, or if he passes away suddenly, there would need to be a special election. There can be elections on particular issues. And so these are just some of the ones that we'll get into today. But first off, we'll start with the big one, the general election, right? And that's the one everybody likes to look at and talk about and argue about, because it's the one that we are exposed to the most. It's always held after primary elections, and election day is always the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Confused yet? If you're not sure, just Google it. But it's always going to be, for whatever reason that rule exists, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Also, who is running in the general election? In every general election, that is every 4 years, all seats in the House of Representatives are up for grabs. And 1/3 of the seats in the Senate are at stake every even-numbered year. This is 2018. It's an even-numbered year. So when Tom Tillis comes to meet with you guys, or his representative, they want your vote. And of course, the presidential election only occurs every 4 years, right? 2016, and then again in 2020, every 4 years. And there are also state and local elections that go on. So it would be in your best interest to do some research about what the ballot's going to look like in November of this year. And there are certainly disputed elections. If there needs to be a runoff election, meaning that the results were disputed from the previous election and they need to run again, that is a possibility. And that could occur on a ballot in a general election. Next, there are issue elections. These are often called referendums. You do have the right to vote on particular issues. Currently, it's not an easy process to get that issue onto the ballot for the average voter. But it does happen, and there is generally one referendum item on every general election ballot. There almost always is, but each one of them represents a big movement to get that on there. And so once more, a referendum is a way for citizens to vote on state or local laws. More examples of issue elections. There are initiatives, and this one's really exciting. Initiatives are a way in which individual citizens can propose new laws or new state constitutional amendments. So let's say that gerrymandering is a subject of great concern to you. Little squiggly districts bug you. And they don't just bug you where you forget about it when you eat lunch. They bother you to the point that you can't sleep. And you want to get it fixed. And you start following the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court does, well, let's say they do nothing. Let's say they rule that the proposed solution is not going to be effective. You just can't leave it alone. You're just bothered by the fact that democracy is ceasing to function on this particular part of our government. Well, guess what? You can do something about it. Because there's other people that are bothered by this too. You're not the only one. And there is a petition going on, a nationwide petition, that just needs enough signatures to make it happen. And an initiative is a way to amend a state's constitution. And this can be done through a proposition. A proposition is a formal petition asking for a new law. Now, there's a formal process. You can't just get your dog to sign it. You can't sign it twice. Every signature has to be validated. But if you obtain enough signatures, the initiative goes onto the ballot. That means Leah has started a movement that now voters of Henderson County will have to decide on. And guys, laws have been changed this way. Other types of elections. There are special elections. For example, let's say that a local election is so close, and I'm sure there have been cases where there was a tie. What do? We can't just have people start killing each other in the streets. We need a backup plan. Let's say there's a tie or it's too close to call, like 1-by-1 vote or something like that. I had a friend who ran for local office in Polk County, Tennessee. He lost by 19 votes. Now, to be fair, only a couple hundred people voted. It was kind of depressing. However, he could have done some math to see if it was within the statistical margin of error, and if it was, he might have been able to request a special election, or a runoff election, that is. But did you know that there is even a way to get rid of poor leaders? It's called a recall election. A recall election is a special election in which citizens can vote to remove a public official from office. It is a vote of non-confidence of the American people. It's not easy to do, once more. At the local level, you've got to get X amount of signatures to have a quorum, meaning enough to actually put this on there. At the national level, we'd be talking about a lot of signatures. So the next question is, what do you guys think of this cycle? Should it be every 2 years? Should it be more often? Some people think there should be term limits on these congressional seats. But of course, the exciting one, right? Presidential elections. Yay, everybody knows about that one. Everybody has an opinion about those people. Presidential elections have 3 major steps. The candidate has to be nominated, obviously, by their party. They then campaign and spend about $1 billion these days, which is crazy. And then we vote. Well, half of us do. Okay, so how's all this break down? National conventions are held every 4 years to determine who the candidate of a particular party is going to be. Originally, the decision was made here. Once upon a time, the American people didn't vote on who was going to be the candidate. It was chosen within the party. And in an effort to make the process more democratic, the parties now allow the states to decide, state by state, who they want their candidate to be. And so the Democratic National Convention is still a really neat thing to watch. It's worth watching if you're into politics. Each state at the convention declares who their candidate for president for that party is going to be. And it's kind of cool. It's a big mass rally. Each state's representative stands up and says, Delaware for so-and-so, Connecticut for so-and-so. But today, they're really just there to communicate the results that we already know. Okay, so elements to a campaign. Number one are the electors. The electors in the Electoral College are people appointed to vote in the presidential elections for the major candidates. You get to vote. Here's where it gets confusing. You get to vote in the election, but it is the electors who decide who the president will be. Now, each of these electors are pledged to a particular candidate, and this is part of the Electoral College system. The Electoral College system is where this group of people called the Electoral College, made up of the electors, are named by each state legislature to select the president and the vice president. Each state gets one electoral vote for each member of Congress, and Washington, D.C. gets 3. So there are a total of 538 electors that make up the Electoral College. These are the people who choose the President of the United States. The numbers change each year, or each election, depending on survey results, when congressional maps are redrawn. Basically, North Carolina has X amount of congressmen that we send to the United States Congress. Each district is one congressman. That is the number of electoral votes that we get. California is the largest state. They have the highest number of electoral votes. Montana is a huge state in terms of size, but is one of the smallest states in terms of population. Ergo, they get some of the fewest electoral votes. That's how the Electoral College works. Now, most states, North Carolina included, use a winner-take-all system. This means that if a particular candidate wins that state's popular vote, all of the electoral votes from that state go to that candidate. So let's assume, I'm making this number up, that North Carolina has 10 districts. That means all 10 would go to whoever won in that popular vote. Let's assume that Montana has 2 districts. That means they only get 2 electoral votes. And so what this means is that as long as the candidate wins the majority, or at least the plurality, more of the electoral votes than anyone else, they're the president. So, these electoral votes are sent to Congress to be counted, and whoever gets the most wins the general election. Now, of course, a lot of people ask why. Why is this? Why does it have to be so confusing? Why do we have a situation in which a person can lose the popular vote but win the Electoral College and become our next president? And why has that happened 5 times in our country's history? And we also have to ask, why are 4 of the 5 Republicans? One was a Whig, to be fair. No, one was a Federalist. But yeah, I believe 4 of the 5 were Republicans. So this leads us to the question of problems with the existing system. A candidate may win the popular vote by a small percentage in states, or in the recent election by 3 million votes. Yet, they lose the popular vote by a large percentage in states that have few electoral votes. So let's say, and what this creates is a really complicated path to victory that every candidate has a team of experts that has studied meticulously. And what they found out is there are about 8 swing states in the United States. That doesn't mean they're married, but they date outside of that. That means they go Democrat some years, they go Republican some years. North Carolina is a swing state. But there are also states that are solid red. Texas will vote for Satan if he is a Republican. They will. Louisiana will vote for Hitler if he runs Republican. New York will vote for Joseph Stalin if he runs as a Democrat. There are some that are solid blue. And unless something big changes, they're going to stay that way. There are some that are solid red. North Carolina is what we call a purple state. It's a swing state. Now here's the thing. When the Republicans are coming up with their strategy, they look at the solid red states and they go, okay, we don't even really need to spend money there. We know they're going to vote red, no matter what. So we're not going to waste our time with those people. But we're not so sure about North Carolina. And that's where it gets really complicated. Then they're going to zoom in on North Carolina. And they're going to go, Asheville's going to vote Democrat no matter what. So we're not going to waste as much time there. However, there are Republicans in Asheville that might not feel their vote matters because they're in Asheville. We got to make sure they vote. And so they're going to look up those people's addresses and they're going to target them directly. In the really contested areas, someone's going to show up at their house with a box of cookies or something.
Seriously? Like they'll actually show up?
Every single house. They canvass the area. They might not be able to give cookies legally, but they're going to find some way to make you feel appreciated. Again, in the heavily contested areas. Of course, the question is, how do we change this? Can we change this? There are some who feel that it needs to be abolished. But it's not a simple process. The bill has come up in Congress over 100 times to get rid of this system, but it has not yet been successful.